So I guess let's start with the Nuggets. I was pretty sure that when we were recording this on Saturday, we would be recording a recap of the end of the season,
Mm-hmm.
but somehow they pulled themselves together and were able to win Game 5, and
Yep.
now they get to go to a Game 6, and they've won 4 elimination games in a row. It's been a wild ride, and here we are waiting for a Game 6.
Yeah, man, and it's uh I believe the Nuggets have overachieved already. Last year, first time back into the playoffs, made it all the way to game 7 of the semifinals. It will be pretty surprising if they make it to game 7 in this series versus the Clippers, a fully healthy, like working close to full cylinders Clippers team. Um, but I'm happy for the team that they've experienced so much adversity. They had a mediocre bubble regular season. Well, actually, they had a mediocre like January, February, March in the regular season. Then the bubble regular season didn't have much confidence, and it was super up and down with the Utah series. But they're still playing basketball, and for that, I look at it as a full um, trajectory-wise win. Hey, cricket.
Cricket agrees.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that has been continue to be frustrating, and if we would have recorded after the Utah series, we would have said Jamal Murray has arrived. He will consistently give you big minutes, and then we come back into this series and he's disappeared over the course of the series. He hasn't had one game where he's taken it over. He had some big shots in Game 5, but we haven't seen Jamal Murray superstar that we saw for 3 games in the Utah series.
Yeah, we haven't. But and I think like the Utah series, he still had his ups and downs. I mean, it was like 36, 12, 14, 50, 50. So yeah, it's still going to be a question with him. But I don't know what point guard in the league would look good versus this Clippers team
Mm-hmm.
because one, he doesn't get to have a rhythm of like a single defender. He has Pat Bev and his crackhead defense, which you can hate on him as much as you want. It's really effective. And then Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So you have like a rotation of three of some of the best perimeter defenders shutting him down. I think what we've always like had to worry about him besides like his consistency shooting is he a true point guard? And the ability to recognize when they're blitzing him and double teaming him is how to get the ball out of his hands and to an open look. He's done better at that. I think he's averaging like 6 to 7 assists per game in this
Mm-hmm.
series. And I think that, for me, that's what, if they were to lose game 6, that's what I'll take away as a big positive towards his game.
But I think even in the game 5, they were more stable when Monte Morris was in the game with Murray. Like it's
Yeah.
still as good as he is, he's still not as good as a regular point guard, which has been interesting to watch and frustrating at times when, like a lot of Malone's lineups, you're just like, you know what's going to work here and you're not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we had a,
Which, pause on that. I will say that I was yelling at him to take Michael Porter Jr. out for the last 5 minutes of the game, and then Michael Porter Jr. ended up hitting the last 3 of the game and the last 4 free throws, the last 7 points. So I'm not saying that I have all the answers, and that
no.
worked out for him, but it's been perplexing and frustrating through a lot of this series.
Well, and I am a Malone apologist more than many, and I was certainly frustrated game 4 when the Nuggets tied it up at like 48 after a really terrible start to the game. And then the first sub they had was not Michael Porter Jr., someone who could maybe help build a lead, but he put in Torrey Craig. And you're not gonna like shut down Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. You can just like contain them. But if you're tied and you have like offensive momentum, you don't put Torrey Craig in the game. So I still frustrated with Malone, but I liked like the teams had to face adversity in several ways. Michael Porter Jr. has brought on a lot of that with its COVID denial, um, or standing for the anthem or agreeing to do it, and then complaining about playing time or plays given to him. I liked that Malone gave him confidence by keeping him in, and he proved him right at that in that instance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that was one. His play of Millsap and Craig has been up and down at times. Craig, for the series before the game last night, was a huge negative on the floor. Whenever he was on the floor, like his negative on the floor was much higher, especially when defending Kawhi Leonard or Paul George. Um, Paul Millsap, again, has given some good minutes, but has been a weight a lot more times than an elevator.
Yeah,
He finally went with the Jokic Millsap or the Jokic Plumlee lineup for a little bit, and it worked a little bit, other than foul trouble. Um, so he is experimenting a little more, especially with lineups. I think Porter's frustration, which I think we all agree with, and he probably shouldn't have said, is that the Nuggets offense doesn't move. It does the same thing over and over again, and it's not putting your players in the best position to win when you have the most dynamic passer in the game as your center and the person the ball goes through. You want it to be an active offense, and Malone just refuses to do that.
yeah, and that's I realize that I can't read offenses and defenses really well as a fan, but you can tell when you're just running a two-man pick and roll game, and it works better than most matchups in the league. Like there's not too many teams who can run two players as effectively in the fourth, and everyone knows it's going to happen and still be able to pull off shots. But the Nuggets have been a team of depth for the last several years, and I know playoffs you shrink the lineups. It was frustrating, and I think if Porter Jr. is going to be on the court, he's not going to be on the court for defense. So give him shots. And the last two games, he actually didn't have that many, even though he really made the most of his shots and free throws last night.
I think one thing that no one has really talked about because it happened before the shutdown was how bad of a trade the Malik Beasley, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, Vanderbilt trade ended up being for the Nuggets.
Big oof.
Like, thinking about this team and how much better it would have been to have more options given that they have shortened the bench so much and just not been able to shoot, where you have two guys, Juancho, who struggled all of last year, and Beasley, who did come in and win games for you. That has been something that we haven't really talked about, but probably they deserve more criticism for getting nothing back from that trade.
Well, they still have the Houston Rockets' first round pick, which is going to be like late 20s at this point. I don't think that matters. Yeah, we look at it. The impetus was that Malik Beasley was probably not going to re-sign with the Nuggets, so traded him kind of prematurely to try to recoup something. But it was for, like, think of all the dudes who had like showed up for a second. What was his? Shabazz Napier, who never played a game with the Nuggets. Jordan McRae.
Diop's the only one that stayed, right?
Yeah. Who? I mean, he was like young dude who could become like a rotational big at some point. But you're absolutely right. Like nothing. When they got rid of Jordan McRae, who was supposed to be like a pretty decent slashing three shooting guard forward, they traded him very quickly, and so now we have Troy Daniels on the team, who should be a three dude, but there's no one that the Nuggets traded for who could take the place of an injured Will Barton.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think, really looking at the second unit, there's no one who first has like the instinct to score and then the actual tools to do so.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that there was no way to predict what happened. And so we can't, from that standpoint, it made sense sort of. But looking like this still could have happened in the playoffs. We could have lost Barton and Harris in the playoffs. No one thought they were healthy guys that this would never happen to. Like, I do think in hindsight, it didn't hurt them at all to keep Beasley given how little they got back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's the thing that I thought about, and this is going further. Whenever the Nuggets exit the bubble, maybe as champions, probably not. That's weird because the league ratings, I'm actually kind of hoping that Clippers, Lakers gets all of the media focus. But we have three-ish point guards on the roster right now. Jamal Murray, Monte Morris, and then PJ Dozier. Is there any scenario where trading up with the first round pick that they have from Houston, packaging that with like one of Monte Morris or PJ Dozier makes sense
To get a point guard?
to get a point guard, another ball handling guard, like same vein of a Will Barton who like may be hurt for longer, and thinking about. I don't think Monte Morris would re-sign with the Nuggets to be part of the bench. He's good enough to be a point guard on a bad team for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just thinking like, okay, we've played this game of depth for so long, and it's gotten the Nuggets to the semifinals, but it's not going to take them to the next level. So I'm trying to think, who are some pieces who have been all right for the Nuggets who aren't part of the long-term plan? Who do you think won't be on the roster next season?
Yeah, I mean, I think Morris obviously is probably the biggest one where you could see him leaving. I don't remember. Is he a restricted free agent? I feel like something's going on with his contract this year.
I think he would be a restricted free agent.
So I think that that's an option. They're going to have to figure out a backup center because Bol can't be your backup center next year. And Plumlee's probably leaving.
Yeah.
Unless he wants to sign a small deal. Same with Millsap. Unless Millsap wants to come back on like a veteran minimum, there's no reason to bring him back. But then you're going to have another power forward. So they've actually got some holes. I think even worse than the guard problem right now.
True. Well, Noah Vonleh, he's the other one who somehow ended up on the team, and I'm not sure whose trade he was a part of or not. But there's with Keita Bates-Diop, Noah Vonleh. I'll throw in Troy Daniels, but I don't think he's part of like dudes who have potential to fill gaps later.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would like to see Noah Vonleh because he's a backup center who can stretch the floor, unlike Plumlee. But of course, Plumlee, and he showed it in this playoffs that he can be a ball handler, and he had like a really beautiful dish to Monte Morris, looked like a hockey assist.
Yeah, and an alley-oop to Porter. Like, he's had a couple of good plays.
Yeah, and it seems of like the chemistry that they talk about the Nuggets may not have. Porter and Plumlee seem to vibe really well. I almost want to keep Plumlee just to keep Porter happy, but yeah, Plumlee he's got a lot of weaknesses, but I think he's overcome some of those. His weakness being he can't score the basketball very well, but he fits really well when he's playing his game. He's the type of dude, like, if he has more than a second to think about what he's doing, then he's probably going to make a mistake. But if the team is flowing, he looks great. And so now I think I would want to keep him over anyone else. Like, Gary Harris has come back to some defensive form and can hit a couple of reliable shots. But, yeah, the face of the team is going to change.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, and there's no money because they're going to they haven't negotiated yet what the salary cap is going to be for next year. They're going to have to move back the draft and free agency for that. But, I mean, there's a lot to try to figure out, and it's something that's so interesting. The NHL draft and free agency is less than a month away. So the face, like how the Avs look in a month, could be completely different, which is not what we're used to when a season ends. Unless you win the championship, there's space between the losing and all of the like shuffling pieces around, which we've seen Sakic do in the last couple of years. So it's going to be quick for the NBA too, because they could start as early as December 1st. I think realistically it's Christmas, but probably later. But they've got a lot to figure out too.
If the NBA resumes in December at some point, does that just mean that the season is always going to start in December and go through to September now? Is that?
So I think there are two ways to do it. Both the NBA and the NHL have realized there's this gap in the schedule where baseball's kind of like died off and football hasn't really taken on yet, where they could move the playoffs. So I think either the NBA or the NHL will eventually move, or both, will move to like a December to like September start because like because America focuses so much on football and college football, the ratings go up a lot, attendance goes up a lot after the new year. And
Uh-huh.
so this is something they need to think about. They could also just have another shortened off season next year. Or, remember the lockout where they were playing like 3 and 4 days? They could be doing that too.
Yeah. Okay. It's almost just because it's the way things. I've been overwhelmed with sports
Yeah.
lately. But I think it would be cool if opening day for the NBA was Christmas, because that's always when. I mean, I think for you and I, we do get psyched for mid-October basketball, but for so many people, yeah, it doesn't start registering until after football has died down.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be the perfect time. College football is basically done. Like, there's an argument that you start December 1st because you just have bowl games for college football. But yeah, Christmas would be the ideal start for the NBA. And it would be more ideal if it was Christmas start, 70 game season, and just like, compress it a little bit because like the season's too long, but that's probably too radical. You know what we're also losing out on? That Thanksgiving tournament we were supposed to get in the NBA where they were just going to like take that break. Do you remember that?
I heard, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it was the beginning of the season tournament, not Thanksgiving, but they were going to basically do an like NCAA style tournament after a round robin, and they were going to have a winner to mark the 75th anniversary of the NBA. And now we're just like sitting here with.
I think with from the boycott of games to players breaking quarantine and everything, I feel that Adam Silver has enough on his plate where he's just like, let's just get through this and then reset.
Yeah, so I'm sure we'll have more to say about the Nuggets after all of this.
Mm-hmm.